The 4 largest facilities that Toyota has, Texas and Kentucky. They're trying to purchase a relationship with the United States. So far, so good. Speaking of the US, here's us. We're kind of in the middle. Now, 2 things about this I want to draw attention to. You see there's kind of a double bulge. The top bulge there, that's the baby boomers. They're the largest generation as a percentage of the population that the United States has ever had. And their numbers in that capital-rich demographic have made the United States capital-rich. Unprecedentedly capital-rich. Perhaps just a little too capital-rich. They're nearing retirement, and they're shoving money into investments that are riskier than they would normally go for because they're trying to get that mythical extra 1% of return before they're done. And that has prompted them to put money into things that, in retrospect, maybe weren't the best idea. This is Enron. This is subprime. This is disco. None of this should have ever happened. And by the year 2022, the majority of the American baby boomer generation will have moved into retirement, and all those prospective investments will be liquidated, and the stocks and bonds will be turned into T-bills and cash because they won't be able to take the volatility because their income is gone. We are right now in the lowest capital costs in history because of the baby boomer capital flood. And in 3 years, it's not just over, it inverts because they'll be drawing down their investments, there'll be less interesting investments, and they'll be drawing pension and healthcare costs. Which means in 3 years, the cost of capital is going to quadruple on average. Next gap down, the baby boomers. They're the second largest generation, they're the boomers' kids. Now, normally I would like to spend about a half an hour in each presentation denigrating the millennials because, you know, easy target. Don't have that time today, so what we're going to do instead is talk about, well, we should all be grateful for the millennials. 3 reasons, only 3, so. Number 1, consumption. All those fidget spinners and all those bedazzled flip-flops and all that fat-free, soy-free, gluten-free, sugar-free, cruelty-free beard butter, it all adds up. Millennial consumption has kept the United States out of recession since 2009. And they're young enough, and there's enough of them that that probably has another 4 years to run. That's fantastic. Second, if you fast forward to the year 2030, when the millennials have matured, and define the word mature however helps you sleep, they will fill out the ranks of the tax-paying class in a way that the small Gen X generation never could. So everything you have heard about the snake swallowing the watermelon of the fiscal crisis with the baby boomers, that is true. Listen to that, prepare for that. But there is a light at the end of the tunnel. It's not a train, it's a millennial. Whether that's a plus or a minus, I guess depends upon where you stand on the issue of millennials. Third, we think of the millennials as the end-all and be-all, but they're really all alone in the night. Everyone else in the world had a baby bust kind of like Korea, and if you look at the rich world demography without the Americans in the same year, 2030, it's a disaster. This isn't a snake swallowing a watermelon, this is a snake swallowing a freight train. And this alone is more than enough to kill most of the countries out there in the wider world. So today, courtesy of the millennials, the United States is the top consuming power, and today, courtesy of the boomers, the United States is the top investment power. But in just 11 years, the United States is the only consumption power and the only investment power. We are in the Great Transition. Just as the world needs the United States, as the United States becomes the only country capable of absorbing global exports, it's lost all interest in doing so. Fourth, geography. Not a hard sell for this crowd. The tan area is the greater Midwest, single largest chunk of contiguous, arable, temperate zone, high-quality farmland in the world. As important as that is, it's really the blue lines. You guys are in ag, you get it. Moving things from A to B is kind of a bitch. But if you float it, it's only 1/12 the cost. The greater Mississippi by itself has more miles of navigable waterway than the combined internal systems of the rest of the planet. In addition, forests and lakes to the north, deserts and mountains to the south, ocean moats on either side. Our chunk of North America is not just the richest territory in the world, it's the most securable. We are condemned to being an agricultural, industrial, financial, and military superpower. Decades of bipartisan effort have yet to screw this up, and we are not going to figure out how in the next few years. And then finally, in this time of change, who holds the guns kind of matters. Now, on the right, you've got a jump carrier. On the left, you've got a super carrier. There are 20 jump carriers in the world. Half are American. There are 11 super carriers in the world. They're all American. It takes 7 jump carriers to equal the firepower of 1 super carrier in the deep blue sea. 1 American supercarrier battle group has more long-range combat capability than the combined navies of the rest of the planet. At current rates of global naval build-out, the rest of the world combined will roughly equal American naval power in the year 2240. I am not losing a lot of sleep over this. But add that up and think about what it means. The only country that can theoretically hold up the global order is the only country that has the guns, is the only country that has no interest in doing so. For the people on this planet whose economic and physical security is completely dependent upon American involvement, that's quite possibly the worst outcome of all. And if you remove the Americans and let the chips fall where they may, local powers, whether out of desperation or opportunity, are going to feel compelled to look after their own interests. That means we get dozens of brush fire wars, with these being the most intense shooting zones. Folks, that's 3/4 of global energy shipments, and 3/4 of global manufacturing supply chain setups, and 3/4 of global agricultural shipments. And what does it all have in common? The Americans really don't care. It's not their trade. And for the most part, it's not even their allies. It's nothing less than the end of the world that we know. Which means it's important to understand the dude at the top right now. Now, when Donald Trump rode that golden escalator down 3 years ago, I think everybody thought it was a joke. Pretty sure he was convinced it was just a PR ploy. Then, lo and behold, a year later, he was in the White House, and the Republican establishment was like, holy crap, how did this happen? We didn't even know he was a Republican. He was a card-carrying Democrat for 35 years. Okay, but he's got our bumper sticker now. So let's put together a team to put in front of him that he can pick from for his new cabinet. So hopefully, we can, make him a Republican post-haste. Allow me to introduce to you the axis of adults. Now, the first guy in the room was Reince Priebus, chair of the Republican National Committee. It was his idea to stack the cabinet. He became chief of staff, and he tried to impose Republican orthodoxy upon the freshman president. In essence, he tried to tell Donald Trump how to think, so he was gone in a year. Rex Tillerson came in. He said, Mr. President, you got to understand when it comes to foreign policy that most Americans work for a small and medium company, and those companies don't trade at all. Most of America's corporate position in the wider world is the Fortune 100, companies like Exxon. So you have to plan policy with that in mind. So he started running his policy from a corporate point of view, and one big thing that big corporations don't do is read Twitter. So Trump would tweet something, and Tillerson would ignore it and just do anything else, and then never the two would meet. So he was gone.
পারে ওইটাই বেশি পারে না